When my brother threw my belongings out and called me a worthless leech, he had no idea I still had full control over his smart home system. He didn't know I had proof of him forging my signature to scam a bank. But what he really didn't know, I didn't have to lift a finger. He was going to destroy himself. And I was going to make sure of it. I never thought the person who would betray me the worst would be my own brother. But life has a funny way of teaching you lessons. Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones sharpening the knife behind your back. My name is Ethan, and up until a few months ago, I had a stable job in cybersecurity, a decent apartment, and what I thought was a solid relationship with my older brother, Brandon. Brandon had always been the golden child, the one everyone in the family admired. He was charming, confident, and knew exactly how to get what he wanted. So, when he and his wife, Vanessa, asked for help buying their dream home, I didn't hesitate. I gave them $50,000 for the down payment, no contract, no paperwork, just trust. Family helps family, Brandon had said. We'll pay you back monthly, it's a promise. I should have known better. A few months later, my company went through massive layoffs and I lost my job. With bills piling up and no immediate job prospects, I turned to the only people I thought I could count on. Brandon and Vanessa welcomed me in with open arms. Stay as long as you need, bro. Your family. Of course, just a small contribution, $900 a month for rent, that's all. Vanessa added sweetly. I agreed. I wasn't looking for a handout. And to make myself useful, I upgraded their entire smart home system, security cameras, automated lights, door locks, remote access, everything. I was the only one with full administrative control. But things changed fast. They stopped inviting me to family dinners, eating downstairs while I stayed in my tiny guest room. Vanessa started making passive-aggressive comments about some people taking advantage of others. I noticed something strange. Brandon wasn't paying me back at all. Instead, my so-called loan repayments were going toward designer furniture, expensive vacations, and new tech gadgets. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking things. Until the morning I overheard their conversation. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard Vanessa laughing in the living room. He actually thinks we'll pay him back? What a joke. Brandon chuckled. That money got us this house, why would we waste it on him? The funniest part? He still thinks he's part of this family. I froze mid-pour. Then slowly, I pulled out my phone and hit record. When I stepped into the room, they looked up startled. So, that's how you really feel? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Brandon leaned back on the couch, smirking. Come on, Ethan. You really think a verbal agreement means anything? That's on you. Vanessa giggled, twirling her hair. You're so naive. You should be thanking us for letting you stay here. Honestly, you're just a worthless leech. And with that, Brandon grabbed my suitcase and threw it down the stairs. Get lost. Nobody needs you. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I simply picked up my laptop bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out. Brandon thought he had one. He had no idea I had recorded every word. He had no idea I had full access to his entire home system. He had no idea I had just begun planning the perfect revenge. And I wasn't going to rush. I was going to make sure he lost everything. His downfall had already begun. As I walked away from my brother's house, the weight of his betrayal settled deep in my chest. But I didn't feel defeated. No, something inside me clicked into place, a sharp and calculated resolve. I wasn't just going to move on. I was going to make sure Brandon and Vanessa learned exactly what it felt like to be discarded, used, and underestimated. And the best part? I wouldn't have to lay a finger on them. They had already built the perfect trap for themselves. I was just going to tighten the noose. I arrived at my friend Caleb's place later that evening. He took one look at me, then at the bag slung over my shoulder, and didn't ask a single question. That's what true friends do. He handed me a beer, gave me a spare key, and said, stay as long as you need. No rent, no strings. Just let me know how I can help. That night, I sat in his guest room, laptop open, fingers poised over the keyboard. It was time to get to work. The first thing I did was go through every financial record I had. Brandon had been sloppy. Not only had he never made a single repayment, but I found something even juicier. He had forged my signature on a bank document to secure a secondary loan on the house. A loan he never intended to pay. If that ever came to light, the bank would come down on him like a hammer. Then there was Vanessa. She had been running an under-the-table clothing boutique from their garage, accepting cash payments and dodging taxes like it was a sport. I remembered seeing her handwritten ledger tucked into a drawer once when I was fixing their Wi-Fi. Lucky for me, I still had full admin access to their cloud backups, which meant I could retrieve all those juicy little transactions she thought were safely hidden away. But my personal favorite? The smart home system. Every camera, every lock, every automated setting was still tied to my master account. While they were celebrating getting rid of me, they hadn't thought for a second about revoking my access. The pieces were all there. Now, I just had to play the game. I started small. Late that night, when I knew they'd be asleep, I accessed their security system and triggered their doorbell camera. A soft chime rang through their house. Then again. And again. Brandon, half asleep and confused, groggily checked the front door camera, but of course, there was no one there. Just as he muttered something and turned to go back upstairs, I adjusted the settings on their thermostat. The heat cranked up to 90 degrees. By morning, I knew they'd wake up sweating, confused, and slightly on edge. The next few days, I kept at it. Their Wi-Fi would mysteriously cut out in the middle of Vanessa's Zoom meetings. Their smart fridge started reading error messages, demanding service. The garage door would refuse to open for Brandon when he tried to leave for work, only to suddenly start functioning the moment he gave up. And then, my personal favorite, Alexa, randomly started playing eerie whispers at 3 a.m., loud enough to jolt them awake. And I was just getting started. While I fine-tuned my digital torment, I also began dropping breadcrumbs where they needed to be found. A few screenshots of Vanessa's unreported business transactions quietly emailed to an IRS tip line. A copy of the forged loan document sent anonymously to the bank's fraud department. I didn't need to make a single accusation, the evidence spoke for itself. And then the real fun began. One afternoon, I got a text from Brandon. "Something's wrong with our system. Everything is glitching. Did you mess with it?" I smirked and left him on read. A few hours later, he called me. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text from Vanessa. "Ethan, I know we had our differences, but we really need your help. The security system won't reset and Brandon is losing his mind. Please, can you at least take a look?" Ah, so now I wasn't a worthless leech anymore. Now they needed me. But I wasn't done yet. That night, I turned up the chaos. Their smart lights flickered in random patterns and their front door lock engaged and disengaged at odd intervals. The washing machine started mid-cycle on its own and their bedroom TV kept switching inputs. I could imagine Vanessa clutching Brandon's arm, whispering, "What if the house is haunted?" By now, their frustration had turned into full-blown panic. But they still had no idea who was behind it. And trust me, this was just the beginning. Before I reveal the next stage of my plan, the moment Brandon's entire life crumbled, let me connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, hit that like button because things are about to get so much worse for Brandon and Vanessa. Brandon and Vanessa were unraveling and I could feel it. Their messages grew more frantic, their calls more frequent. Every glitch, every malfunction, every unexplained tech failure was pushing them closer to the edge. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. It was time to tighten the screws. The next phase of my plan was about precision. I didn't want just inconvenience, I wanted chaos. I wanted them to feel like their entire world was falling apart piece by piece while having no idea who was pulling the strings. First, I took Vanessa's work down. She relied on her online business to maintain the lifestyle she flaunted so much: expensive clothes, designer handbags, and those weekly spa appointments she pretended were self-care. Without it, she had nothing. I began with the Wi-Fi. Every time she tried to log onto her boutique's website, she'd be met with a server not found error. Her emails bounced back. Payments from customers disappeared into thin air. Desperate, she reached out to tech support only for them to tell her everything seemed perfectly fine on their end. Meanwhile, I watched from my screen as she angrily pounded on her laptop, red-faced and frustrated. Then I went after her social media. I didn't need to hack anything, I simply reported every one of her posts for fraudulent activity. Within 24 hours, her business pages were flagged. Ads were suspended. Her entire digital storefront was locked pending an investigation. She had zero access to the platform that made her money. She tried to create a new account. I had already anticipated that. The moment she did, I reported it again. She was drowning and she didn't even know where the water was coming from. Then came Brandon. Unlike Vanessa, his downfall wouldn't come from social media. No, his would come from something much more satisfying. His own arrogance. I waited for the perfect moment. A critical day at work. An important presentation. The one chance he had to secure a lucrative contract that would keep his company afloat. I knew about it because, of course, he had bragged about it endlessly. That morning, as he prepared to log into his meeting, his work laptop refused to connect to the company server. His VPN wouldn't authenticate. His email wouldn't sync. He tried hotspotting from his phone blocked. Panicked, he grabbed Vanessa's laptop instead. That's when the real fun started. The moment he logged in, his screen flooded with pop-ups. Hundreds of them. His own web history plastered in bright, flashing tabs. Gambling sites. Questionable financial transactions. Private messages he had sent to someone who definitely wasn't his wife. It wasn't fake. It was real, just curated and timed perfectly. I wish I could have seen his face. He yanked the power cable, slamming the laptop shut just as Vanessa walked into the room. "What the hell is going on?" she demanded. He had no answer. And then, as if on cue, an email popped up on his phone. From his boss. "Brandon, we need to have a discussion about the security breach on your device." I could almost hear the blood draining from his face. That was the final push. Brandon lost the contract. His company began reviewing his activity, questioning his credibility. Within a week, he was put on temporary leave while they conducted an internal investigation. He was done. The house that had once been filled with smug laughter and whispered insults now echoed with shouting and slammed doors. Vanessa blamed Brandon for not fixing their failing business. Brandon blamed Vanessa for her stupid online hustle, ruining their finances. They were turning on each other. And I hadn't even gotten to the best part yet. Because while they were busy fighting, I had been carefully planting seeds where they needed to be found. Anonymous tips, a flagged tax return, a quiet notice to their mortgage lender, highlighting some irregularities in their financial records. And just like that, the house they stole from me, the one they mocked me for helping them get, was no longer theirs. Because foreclosure letters don't care about arrogance. And neither do I. Brandon and Vanessa's world was cracking, and I wasn't done watching it fall apart. The messages from them had stopped being demanding. Now they were frantic. Vanessa had lost her entire income stream overnight. Her business account was still locked. Her payments were frozen, and customer complaints were piling up. She tried reaching out to customer support, but the system flagged her account for suspicious financial activity. She was under review indefinitely. Without her boutique, she had nothing to contribute to the household. No more luxury shopping sprees, no more brunches with her influencer friends. Just a mountain of bills and a husband whose patience was running dangerously thin. Brandon, on the other hand, had bigger problems. The email from his boss was only the beginning. The IT department at his company had flagged his security breach, and now HR was involved. He was forced to hand over his work laptop for an internal audit. The same laptop I had carefully orchestrated to betray him. He must have been sweating bullets, knowing what they would find. And sure enough, 2 days later, he was placed on indefinite unpaid leave pending investigation. But the real bombshell landed on a crisp Wednesday morning when Brandon opened his mailbox and pulled out a thick, ominous envelope. His hands trembled as he scanned the words, "Notice of foreclosure proceedings." For a moment he just stood there, stunned. Then, as the reality sank in, he erupted. Vanessa ran outside in her silk robe, demanding to know what was happening. Brandon shoved the letter at her, his face red with rage. "We're losing the house," he growled. She snatched the papers from him, flipping through them with increasing panic. "How?" she shrieked. "We've been making payments." Had they? Not exactly. Turns out, when you spend your money on designer handbags and new furniture instead of your mortgage, the bank starts to notice. And thanks to the anonymous tip they received regarding Brandon's fraudulent loan application, their patience had officially run out. Vanessa was spiraling, pacing back and forth in their once pristine driveway, her carefully curated life collapsing around her. This can't be happening. What are we going to do? Brandon wasn't listening. He was already on his phone, calling the bank, trying to salvage what was left. I watched from a distance, completely invisible to them. They had no idea I was behind every misstep, every failure, every door slamming shut in their faces. And then, just when I thought the moment couldn't get any sweeter, my phone vibrated. A text from Caleb. "It's official. The house is up for auction." I grinned. The trap had fully sprung. Brandon and Vanessa weren't just losing their dream home. They were about to find out who was buying it. A month passed. A month filled with desperate calls to the bank, meetings with lawyers they couldn't afford, and pleading messages to family members who suddenly didn't want to be involved. No one wanted to lend them money. No one wanted to help. Their perfect social circle, the one they had built with smugness and wealth, had evaporated the moment they became financially irrelevant. Brandon and Vanessa had officially lost the house. The foreclosure was final. The bank had listed it for auction, and within days, the property had a new owner. Me. I had made sure of that. When the papers were signed, I stood in the empty living room, the very same place Brandon had called me a worthless leech. The irony wasn't lost on me. The official move-out deadline was approaching fast, and I knew they had to return one last time to collect their remaining belongings. I waited for them. When their car pulled into the driveway, Vanessa looked broken. Her once flawless hair now tied in a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes. Brandon looked worse. His usual arrogance had been stripped away, replaced by the hollow, tired expression of a man who had lost everything. They hadn't noticed me yet. Vanessa stormed inside, flipping on the lights. She stopped dead in her tracks, eyes widening as she saw me standing there, leaning against the kitchen counter. Brandon followed behind, and the moment his gaze met mine, his entire body stiffened. "No," he breathed. I smirked. "Surprised?" I asked, tilting my head. "I figured you'd recognize the new owner." Vanessa made a choked sound, half rage, half disbelief. You did this?" I set my coffee cup down on the counter, completely at ease. "Did what?" I shrugged. "Buy a house? That's not a crime, is it?" Brandon's hands curled into fists, his face darkening. "You ruined us." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny," I said. "I could have sworn you did that to yourselves." For a long, tense moment, no one spoke. Then Vanessa, ever the strategist, forced a sickly sweet smile onto her face. "Ethan," she said, stepping forward. We were wrong. Okay. We should have paid you back. We should have treated you better. But you have to understand we're family. You can't just let us." I cut her off with a chuckle. "I seem to recall you saying I was worthless, that nobody needed me." I glanced around the house. "Seems like that worked out well for you." Brandon clenched his jaw. "Ethan, please, just give us some time. We'll figure something out. We just need a little help." "Help? That was rich?" I pretended to think about it, rubbing my chin. Then slowly, deliberately, I walked over to the front door and swung it open. "You have 30 minutes. Vanessa's expression collapsed into fury. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "This is our house." I stepped aside and gestured toward the doorway. "No, Vanessa. It's mine." Brandon grabbed her arm, his face pale. "Let's go," he muttered. "We're done here." And just like that, they were gone. For good. I stood in the doorway as their car pulled away, watching as they disappeared down the street. Then I turned, shut the door behind me, and locked it. The security system, now fully reset to my controls, confirmed what I already knew. They would never step foot in this house again. I walked into the living room, exhaling slowly, letting the weight of everything settle over me. The betrayal. The months of planning. The satisfaction of knowing that karma, in all its poetic justice, had done exactly what it was supposed to do. I had won. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. If there's one priceless lesson to take away from this story, it's this: never let betrayal break you, let it build you. Ethan could have crumbled when the people he trusted the most turned their backs on him. He could have begged, lashed out, or sunk into despair. But instead, he chose something far more powerful. He let success be his revenge. He didn't need to fight, argue, or force them to see his worth. He simply stepped away, focused on himself, and let karma do the rest. The best way to respond to those who underestimate you isn't anger, it's proving, through action, that you were never the weak one to begin with. When you stop giving your energy to people who don't deserve it, you reclaim your power. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to share your thoughts. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you trusted turned their back on you? How did you handle it? Type 2 if you found this story satisfying, or 7 if you had a different take on it. Let's see how many of you have faced moments like this in your own lives. And if you believe in the power of karma, in letting success speak louder than words, then hit that like button. It lets me know you're here for more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe to Mr.HeartVibes for more gripping tales of betrayal, redemption, and triumph. There's always another story waiting to be told, and I'll see you in the next one.